Welcome everybody to the meeting of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority. This is Wednesday, November 1st. Ms. Thompson, would you conduct roll call?
Micah Bartelme.
Present.
Steve Brummer.
Present.
Alex Deek. Milton Mahoney.
Present.
Tyler Kinley. Angela Jackson. Present. Jessica Letaw. Darren McKinnon. Mike Micklon.
Present.
Bressa Nichols.
Present.
And Danielle Vaughn.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Hey. Thank you very much, Maura. Before we go any further, I would like to extend our warmest welcome to our newest board member, Angela Jackson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
First meeting. Next up, we have approval of the board meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you much. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, please say nay. Motion is approved. Agenda is approved. If you have public comment, do we have anybody signed up for public comment? We'll have 3 minutes each. Seeing none, we will move on to city boards and commissions. Dr. Honeyman? No. Okay. Next up, we have our executive director report, Ms. Thompson.
I just want to second your welcome to Angela Jackson. We're super happy to have you here and appreciative that you've joined the board, so thank you.
Thank you.
Also want to welcome a new member to the DDA team, Sandra Andrade, who many of you know from the Main Street Area Association, has joined us as our new program specialist, so we are thrilled to have Sandra. I'm also very pleased to announce that the DDA was awarded an $800,000 MEDC grant for our 4th Ave project. This was is a revitalization and placemaking grant. We collaborated with the Housing Commission. They received about $4 million for their 121 Catherine project, and we received $800,000 for 4th Ave. So that's pretty exciting. And then just a couple of quick reminders. We have our next DDA board work session on November 15th. And also on the last page of your packet, Kelly has included all of the 2024 meeting dates. So we're at that time of year again. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Do we have any DDA members' communications?
Yes.
Mr. Devine?
Similar to the joint meeting that this board had with the city council, our staff has an annual session with city council. That will occur on December the 11th at 4 p.m. And the reason that I'm bringing it up here, we will be, as an administration, addressing the city's profile, if you will, as it relates to economic development that has not been done in years in this town. So might be something people want to hear what we have to say about it. Additionally, we have invited representatives from the University of Michigan. They are currently going through their version of a comp plan. And so we're inviting them to come and share where the university is planning on going the next 20, 30, 40 years. I have seen the presentation, and it's very ambitious and aspirational, and clearly has some implications that includes downtown. So again, people may want to pay attention to it. I know our meetings aren't riveting, but you know, if you want to keep up with what's going on, there'll be a lot discussed there. And then finally, we will be discussing our planning process for the upcoming election cycle in 2024. That is probably going to be another contentious exercise in the United States, and we're not immune from it. So we're going to lay out how we plan on implementing the election. So December 11th at 4 o'clock, you can turn on, or you can come to city council if you want. Just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Marvin.
Thank you.
Will the university be also presenting their plan that you were discussing?
Sue Dodd and Mike Rain will be present in the chambers. I'm going to give them the last half of the meeting, and it's their show.
Okay. Thank you. Any other communications? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Judge. This would be, I guess we'll do a second. Any discussion?
No.
Fantastic. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Consent agenda is approved. Special business reports. First up, we have the curbside management study presentation. The DDA contracted with Walker to conduct a curbside management study. We have two members of the consultant team with us today, Chrissy Mancini and Jen Corbett. Chrissy will present an update on the study. This is informational only. There is no action required by the board.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having us today. I'm Chrissy Mancini and
Jim Corbett.
Perfect. Jim, you were formerly, you lived in Warburg for
So my backstory is when Republic Parking first took over the operating contract in 2001, I believe it was. An interim director that was here, or initial director was here, and I came in shortly thereafter and ran the parking system from 2001 through 2005. So almost another lifetime ago. But it's good to be back. It's still good to see things thriving here in Ann Arbor.
So thanks for having us today. We're going to talk about an update to the curb management study. And first, we just want to give some background about why we study curbs, why they're such a valuable asset. And we saw that a lot through the pandemic as businesses use curb space for outdoor dining. Curb space helped pedestrianize roads so that people could be outdoors safely. So that showed us where before it was, we don't want to remove certain curb uses, and now we have more opportunity to do so because it's not, it just works for business and for access. So, what you do with curb space, it helps bring people downtown, it helps support business. Everything that the DDA and the city is doing today to pedestrianize streets, stateless or curbless State Street, the bike lanes, parking transit, these are all, we look at best practices, that's happening in Ann Arbor. And, we work across the country in many cities, very large to small towns, and what we see happening here is a best practice. So, that's just really stuck with us throughout this process is, you're prioritizing curb spaces based on city goals and DDA goals. You're incentivizing behavior through pricing. We digitize the curb regulations through this study, so that's really important because in the not so distant future, curbs will communicate with delivery drivers, and when you're driving through your dashboard, with scooters, all these different ways that curbs will communicate through this curb data specification that's being developed right now. And we've digitized the curb through this study, so you're ready for it. Not many cities are doing that, are already on that path. So, just looking at all the best practices, all the goals that the DDA has and the city has for people-friendly streets, the transportation plan, the climate plan, the street design manual, we're already seeing that through this study. So today we want to talk through some of our findings and next steps and recommendations. So just to start, curb use data collection, we collected camera data in 3 areas in Carytown, on Liberty Street, and in the South University area for a week at a time from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. We need to use cameras because so many short-term stays are happening. You probably see it all the time. Just walking around like we used to do every hour with our clipboard doesn't capture most of the data that's most of the activity happening at the curb. So here's some overall findings. Curb utilization, the times that the parking meters are enforced is not balanced. So parking utilization is very high after 6 p.m. in some areas when the curb when parking isn't enforced. So it really limits the ability to manage that space during some of those peak times. Most curb sessions, no matter the data area, are 15 minutes or less, are 2 minutes or less. So super short stays. Those parkers are parking wherever they can. It doesn't matter if the curb is regulated for parking, for loading in front of an alley. People are just parking wherever they can find a space. There's a significant amount of curb violations, which we'll talk about, and when we talk about curb violations in this context, this is not looking at parking tickets. This is what we saw in the camera data of people that are just parking everywhere. They probably didn't get a ticket because they're parking for like 2 and 4 minutes. And just an example, so in the university area, almost 20% of all the curb stays were violations. So that's just creating a lot of conflict safety issues. And then we also studied meter data, and we saw that there was a significant of people who were not paying the meter. So there was a big gap in the number of curb use stays and the number of meter payments. So, there's just lots of problems because the curb is, even in places where there's no parking, it's just functioning as legal parking. And obviously violations matter because they're preventing access to local business, they're causing safety conflicts, congestion. So in terms of the data findings and the typologies, so we're identifying typologies of the city, like downtown, what is, that's a dense area, similar to the street design manual. Carytown is more like of a neighborhood commercial area. But what we're seeing is the downtown dense area, there's lots of fast casual restaurants, there's just the need for more access to that space. But there's just lots of nuance. So on South Forest, for example, there's a lot of illegal parking. You need that parking to preserve access to business, but when you think about removing parking in areas where there is this dense development, keep in mind that you need to figure out the spillover effects. That's just, when people are parking for less than 5 minutes, it's very challenging to enforce. For example, in other Carytown, there's definitely high utilization during farmers market days. That's a definitely need a nuance. And then outside of dense areas, just consider spillover effects. So quickly going through some of the data, like I said, most curb sessions are less than 15 minutes. In Carytown and Liberty, under almost 20% of all the curb sessions were less than 2 minutes. This is just a lot of short-term pickups and drop-offs, maybe Uber and Lyfts. Liberty and Carytown, you see the steady peak throughout the day, sort of drops off at the end of the day, but still pretty high utilization, you still see that higher peak. And then this is what I was referencing. So the green line shows the parking meter transactions. The orange line shows all the curb sessions, whether or not they were legitimate or a violation, so parking in a no standing zone or a no parking zone. So there's a big gap between people parking and not paying. And then there's also this peak time at the end of the day where the meters are not enforced and you're not capturing those transactions, and really you're not able to manage that peak because the meters aren't enforced. The South University area, we just saw a lot of 2/3 of vehicles are parked for less than 15 minutes, 20% of vehicles are parked for less than 2 minutes. And here you even see that the peak really just increases throughout the day. And after the meters are not enforced, it keeps going. So that's where we see there's no regulation or enforcement during the peak demand, and even a bigger gap between the curb use and the parking meter transactions, because I think the curb violation, the average violation was only 4 minutes, so really challenging to enforce that. And then looking at it from just on a map, you can see here, where this coffee shop is, there's just, even though it's no parking, it's functioning the same way on Liberty as the 2-hour parking. So, people are just stopping, running in to get their coffee. It doesn't really matter what the sign is regulated. In Carytown, similar, but you do see where that 15-minute curb is, the black line. People were responding and parking only for 15 minutes and obeying that because just so many of the sessions are short. And, but you can still see the no parking. People are still parking there. And, farmers market, obviously, there's lots of demand for curb space at that time. And then in the South University area, it's just sort of lots of curb sessions, and I stood out on Forest for a few hours, and it was just nonstop. I mean, there's a juice store, there's 2 Thai restaurants, there's a 7-Eleven, and people are just in and out all day long. So, this is just what we're experiencing. But, looking at the curb sessions, this is on South University, 1,528 curb sessions during, that's a lot of access that's being provided to those businesses. So, that's really important in the context of the study, is how we maintain that access to business. So these are the recommendations that we're looking through: immediate, near term, and longer term. In the immediate, updating the rates, which we're already going through, more short-term spaces, creating some standards around loading and ADA, developing an enforcement strategy. And when we talk about enforcement, we kind of reference it when we used to collect parking data. Like I said, we would walk around every hour, with a clipboard, and we can't do that. We have to have technology. We're seeing this in every city is struggling, is how to enforce this curb space. So developing an enforcement strategy that really can help enforce the regulations out there, and just make sure that you are reducing the safety and conflicts, and the congestion is very important. To deal with all the complexity of today's curb space. And then developing a data collection process. We collected data through this study with the cameras. Collecting data is important because it shows you how you're doing and helps make decisions, but it's also challenging right now because you need cameras and infrastructure, and it's expensive, and so we're working with different vendors. We're testing out different products and hoping that will get more streamlined and easier in the next few years. And then performance measures in the near term, then enacting that enforcement strategy and updating the hours, package lockers so that delivery drivers can deliver to one off-street location, that people can go get their packages. And then the long term, thinking about paid users, and everyone should be paying for curb space. Commercial delivery drivers, we're working on smart loading zones, for example, in Omaha, where commercial delivery drivers are all paying for 15-minute sessions, and FedEx and UPS are invoiced every month. We really need to think about, that's a valuable space, you're repurposing it for different uses, and how do we make sure that everyone, it's fair and equitable and everyone pays. And then long term, like I said, the curb digitization, already being set up to even do some of those things with the digital curb regulations. And then lastly, we wanted to just tie this in to an example with the William Street Bikeway. So, this shows some of the successes and thinking about the nuance and piloting to learn how to implement something successfully. So the William Street Bikeway was previously a travel lane or a parking lane, and now it's a bikeway. Thousands of cyclists are using it. It's been a great success. But what contributed to that success was there was a thoughtful process to first identify Williams as a bikeway, figuring out you're removing 16 parking spaces, so how are you going to make sure that people aren't parking in the bike lane or still have access to those that need it for parking? So you kept parking on the south side of William, identified where short-term parking would be located on adjacent streets, where ADA parking would be located. That all helps manage that spillover. And then taking an iterative approach where you starting out with delineators to deter illegal parking, but realizing people are parking in the bike lane, that you need something more substantial. So then installing those curbs so that you can actually enforce that bike lane. So that testing, the collecting data, just being smart about it, those are the best practices that we're working on. And this is just a great example of the nuance and making sure that something this important works. So with that, we'll take any questions.
You had indicated in a previous slide about the 2 to 4 minute as the norm. I'm wondering, when you observe post 6 p.m., are people parking longer? My assumption is people are coming to want to hang out after 6 than the 4-minute run in and do whatever they're doing. Would that be fair?
I think it depends on the area. In the university study area, it's
Still that.
like all day. Still a lot of short-term parking all day.
And to your point, I think people are parking longer, but that short-term activity still
Still
exists. And now people are parking in fire hydrants, driveway curb cuts, because they're just gonna be in 15 minutes and out. So that the lack of management during that time creates a new problem in a sense.
And we see that so much activity, people going to dinner now after 6, so it's.
Yeah, can you go back to the slide where on one of the where it shows the different times of day in use?
So Liberty, so at 6, it's still, at 6 p.m., it's like right in line with at 8 a.m., some in the afternoon. And on University, it's just, I'm sorry, the peak is just all day. It just steadily, the utilization increases.
I have 2 questions. So you mentioned that we have been digitizing the curb in some form through this study. So how much have we done, and what does that kind of, what functionality will that give us in the future when we look at these alternative options for enforcement, digital enforcement, et cetera?
So what we did was there's a platform, so we went around and we started out with all the data, so every sign, every meter, and then we went around and took actual photos. That is all in a digital platform. The whole DDA area. So every regulation is there, and it's in this standard, the curb data specification to communicate, and eventually, FedEx will plan its delivery routes in that standard. And the idea is it'll know that this space is a 15-minute loading space and its drivers can go right there. And so basically that you're set up to do
Does it
that.
digitize like map with overlays of regulations and appropriate uses, et cetera?
Yeah.
That can be edited, shifted,
Yeah.
resubmitted based on changing information, et cetera.
Yeah, you
But
have
we don't have sensors on the curves and digitize in that sense where it's.
No. So in Omaha, we installed cameras that can read license plates, and then when UPS pulls up, we work through the DMV, we know every license plate, and we also work with UPS to
Yep.
do this. And now we know UPS sat there for 15 minutes, they're gonna pay $1, and then we add up all those sessions every month and invoice UPS. But even that is still a very pilot stage.
So I guess that's the next question would be what options exist currently for these kind of enforcements and, the third part of future and, if we're setting these apart and, the curb's communicating with either these fleet vehicles or individual vehicles, what's available now and where's it going?
Well, what's available is really in the pilot. So we're testing this technology to see if it works. I'll be honest, the accuracy rates last month were not great, so the company is coming out and reinstalling cameras. But you could start, the policies though can be in place. In some cities, they're starting with just a commercial vehicle fee, a permit fee, so that as you have the technology there, then you're kind of catching up with it because it's expensive. You don't want to just. I would say wait to see what the pilots are going to produce before you invest a lot of resources in the technology. But you can take steps to start the freight companies and Uber and Lyft to think about paying for access. The state of Michigan limits local control over per ride fees for Uber and Lyft, unlike other states. So that would be changing the state law to make them pay.
there any recommendations for how to better enforce the violations that are occurring with these very short stays?
Several. Technology, of course, comes to the forefront. I think, enforcement folks are using some level of technology already. We get the sense that they, just from our stakeholder interaction with them very early on in this process, that they're a very busy group with the resources that they have already. So we start to think in terms of how can we make their jobs easier and potentially more enjoyable. Those were some of the kind of elements that we picked up in the conversation there. So, so as an example, we're also doing some work up in East Lansing, and they've got a group called PACE up there that does their enforcement, and they seem to be very aggressive in how they handle it. So there's a wide swath of where Ann Arbor's at and where East Lansing is at, and so there's got to be a balance in the middle there somewhere. It's almost to the point where folks are chronically complaining about the PACE group, but they get the issue there. So I think it's just really studying what that resource level needs to be, and can it be better managed with better technology so that you don't have to have, as Chrissy described it, all of the manual process in place.
Even setting goals, looking at the data, reviewing data, sharing data, I think there's probably a lot of steps that can be taken to support a more robust enforcement.
So I don't know how much of this is in your scope, but I'm curious of your recommendations. What if you have a balance between like enforcement and wayfinding and design as deterrent? Like I'm wondering how much can we use carrot to stay away from stick is what I'm asking.
Well, there's signs out. The signs are clear.
Right, and what I'm saying is
Yeah.
clearly they're not doing the job. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have suggestion for different signage, different street furniture, different whatever that would continue to help move away from those violations. And maybe the answer is no, but when I hear us talking about enforcement and nothing else, I get a little nervous. So I'm just wondering if there are other types of recommendations.
Yeah, and some cities use big, bright digital signs. And that's all. Those are new too.
Mm-hmm.
So in Redwood City, for example, California, we're testing those. But yeah, I think people are just parking wherever they can find a space.
Mhm.
And
Understood.
like,
Mhm.
the signs. It's not we're seeing it everywhere.
Mhm.
So it's not just something unique to Ann Arbor.
Mhm.
And you could, we wouldn't recommend enforcement. We want warnings. We want education.
Mhm.
It's not just issuing a ticket.
Mhm.
That's why looking at data, setting goals and looking at data is so important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Okay, next up we're on new business. And we have a resolution to provide an affordable housing grant to Avalon Housing. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you. In October, the executive committee reviewed a request for an affordable housing grant from Avalon. The request is for $28,100 for reconstruction of a retaining wall at their property at 426 South First. This property serves residents with incomes at or below 30% AMI, therefore satisfying the DDA's housing fund requirement, stipulating funds can only be used for projects serving residents at incomes of 60% or below. We have Joel Barson from Avalon here to answer any questions. Hi, Joel. Come on up. If you'll recall, we did review this just for informational purposes at the last board meeting. We did not have quorum on which to vote. Questions for Joel? If there's no questions, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Motion passes, resolution approved. Thanks, Joel.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Appreciate your patience and coming back.
My pleasure.
Next up, we have a resolution to support modifications to the DDA capital projects included in the city CIP. That's going to be on page 64 of the board packet, also up on the screen. Last year, the DDA board approved a full 6-year DDA capital plan for inclusion in the city CIP. This year is a modification year where the upcoming 2 years, fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26, are reviewed and adjusted. Overall, the modifications are minor on both the TIF and parking side, mainly due to project timing. On the TIF side, the changes are necessary based on city and MDOT project schedules in addition of the 800,000 MEDC grant, which Maura referenced earlier. On the parking side, modifications have been made based on the updated 20-year plan. And staff is available to answer any questions from the board on these adjustments. Questions? Hearing none, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, you know what? I forgot. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Next up, item C, DDA bylaws. Proposed changes to section 6, quorum and voting. You'll find that on page 67 and 68. In response to the board not being able to conduct business at its September-October board meeting, staff are recommending a change to the DDA bylaws, which Maura will review. Maura?
Thank you. As Micah just mentioned, we've had some challenges being able to do business because we haven't had a quorum. And as you can see, our current bylaws, the quorum section, I'll just read the first sentence. It states, a majority of the members of the board in office shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. However, the next sentence says, a vote of 7 members shall constitute the action of the board. So that has been the obstacle for us. The second sentence, the last 2 meetings we have had 6 board members present, but we cannot conduct any business in terms of voting without that 7 members that's stipulated in the bylaws. So we are proposing, and this has been run by the DDA's attorney, to just simply remove that sentence so that a majority of the members of the board in office shall constitute a quorum. You can vote and you can conduct business. And right now we have 11 members seated, so our quorum is 6. Previous to Angela joining the board, we had 10 members seated. So we could have done business with 6 members had our bylaws been adjusted. So I think this will just make us a little bit more efficient when people's schedules get busy, especially thinking about the holidays coming up. And the way our changes are to be made to the bylaws, staff is to bring the recommendation to the board at one meeting, and you would vote on it at a subsequent meeting. Questions?
Thank you, Maura. Questions, discussion?
Yeah, my only question was, is this the first time this has been presented, so we can't vote on it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, got it.
And just a comment that I think it's really important that we make this change at the next meeting to make sure that we can keep doing the work. It's been a big issue for us.
I would agree with that, but I don't want to lose sight of having a full board and have this be an easy way for us to be able to put that on the back burner time after time of making sure that we're encouraging people to join the DDA, getting diverse opinions, engagement, things like that.
Agreed.
Because this has kind of pushed us to like those things, but I know we're at the mercy of others. So I 100% agree we need to move forward with this.
Thank you.
I agree with that, too. We do need to have a means of conducting business. And I think in the spirit of what I heard from you, for this kind of organization, if we were having a whole bunch of 6-5 votes, then I think we need to talk a whole lot more.
Exactly.
Because you don't really want that for the kind of work we're doing. If we're that split, then we need to work a little harder to get to a stronger consensus. But you can't be so hampered that you're going 2 and 3 months and can't do routine things for lack of quorum. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Milton.
Thanks, Maura.
Thank you, Maura. Great. Next up, we have the executive director hiring discussion. You'll find that on pages 69 to 77 of your packet. I have two resolutions to move. The first one is a resolution to establish a framework for an executive director review process. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. A little bit of backstory on this. Last year, we used Riemann as a third-party firm to help us both conduct reviews, establish a framework, and work with the previous executive director. We found them to be very capable, and we would like to move forward with hiring them again this year and work with them both to adopt the information that we reviewed in the previous work session around the job description, priorities, etc., as a framework for setting a review process and codifying these items for the upcoming executive director position. So I'm very excited to have them back and to have them help us put this together. Questions, comments?
Can you talk about, so I remember, and this is probably on me for being out for a little bit on Mat Leave, but last year I remember when we talked about this, there was kind of these three pillars of how we could move forward.
Correct.
One was promoting our interim and hiring that person full-time. The other was a full external search, and then there was a third option, and so could you just refresh my memory on that and then
so
where
what
this
we,
fits in?
what we heard was overwhelming support for appointing Maura and talking about how we needed to set up this framework for success and learn from past mistakes. So this was presented, we discussed, we also had support for these items. And also bringing in Riemann, which is the resolution we have in front of us now, to help us establish this framework and take these documents that staff prepared and board had input on, and putting them into both the description and the framework for the review.
Okay.
Yep. So
Okay.
this is kind of step one, and then we have a second resolution coming in afterwards, which is next in the board packet.
Okay,
Which will be
perfect.
two. Yep.
Thank you. I
So
wanted to
what
make
we're
sure.
voting on now is the resolution to establish a framework for an executive director review process. If it helps, I can read the resolution.
No, that's perfect. I read through when Kelly sent it over, but I was like, I think in person I just need somebody to break this down for me so I know I'm interpreting it correctly. Because I've been out for a second.
Okay. If there's no more discussion, we'll take it to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Resolution passes. Thank you very much. Next up, on page 77, we have a resolution to authorize an offer of employment to Maura Thompson as DDA Executive Director. Do I have a second? Support. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to bring this forward. This is a resolution which would authorize the DDA chair and staff in conjunction with city HR to work on a contract offer to make Maura Thompson our permanent executive director. We've had a lot of discussion about how Maura has supported this organization through some difficult times and the job that she's done. So I'm very pleased to be here and to move this resolution, and I welcome any additional discussion at this table.
I'll just, from my perspective, speak in support of it. The organizational dynamic that we have here has required, in some cases, unfortunately, very lengthy terms for an interim performance. Because of that, we have seen evidence of Maura's functioning in the role on different occasions, both for long stretches. She's demonstrated a level of stability. She has engaged well with city staff. She has done the things that we've asked her to do. Irrespective of who the interim has been, It's not on them if the board doesn't have clear metrics.
Yeah.
It's not on them if the board doesn't have a clear vision for what they want the person to do. That's on us. And so this work will help get that done. But as the city administrator, I don't typically support processes like this, but I support this one because I've seen more work. I've worked with her, and my team is very appreciative of her contribution. So I'll be a solid yes.
Thank you, Melanie.
Second.
Well, without further ado, let's bring this to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Resolution passes. Congratulations, man.
Thank you, Laura.
Can I mention one thing?
Yes, please.
Procedurally, once the negotiation is done, there will have to be a resolution prepared that goes in front of city council. We only have a few meetings left in the calendar year. We meet twice a month. So if the intent is to get council approval, December 20th is the latest that can happen. It'll roll over to January. And because staff is considered city employees, it's not official until it goes past that council blessing the resolution. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you. Fantastic. Moving on to unfinished business. We have the parking system rates recommendation on page 78. The recommended slate of parking rate increases was presented to City Council at the October 10th City Council DDA work session. Council received the information, questions were answered, and no concerns were expressed. Today we have before us the detailed rate table outlining proposed increases over the next 3 years. The next step of the process is for the DDA board to put this rate table forward at its December meeting, at which time a public hearing date will be announced. The public hearing will take place in February, followed by DDA board vote in March. Any discussion about the rates or the process? And just for clarification, that public hearing will be at the board meeting here in this room. So we'll have a chance to hear from all sorts of people.
So I wasn't here last month. I was here the month before and for the work session to hear kind of how this was developed. So I remember the consultants proposed most conservative to most aggressive pricing. And I'm wondering what this reflects or what it's closest to.
My recollection was we had version 1, 2, and 3, and this is version 2.5, which is a blend of 2 and 3.
Got it.
So it's a little rip off the Band-Aid, but not too hard,
Got it.
and smooth sailing going up there. So, yeah, it kind of blends the needs of both the revenue increases, maintenance, and the fund balance levels.
Got it.
So we're a little under where we want to be on fund balance, but it's relatively okay.
Okay, thank
And
you.
they also took into consideration the impacts to some of the spots that we were worried might disproportionately. So like the overnight rates, they tweaked those based on our feedback. I thought they did a
Yep.
really good job taking
Great.
the feedback and
They sounded responsive.
reworking it. Yeah, they were.
Okay, thank you.
We have positive feedback from council.
Mhm.
Again, this will require the process and ultimately our council's adoption.
It was actually quite delightful at the work session. They were like, why isn't this more aggressive? And I'm like, where have you been?
I would like to say though that they wouldn't have gotten the feedback if we wouldn't get it to them. We had a
Yeah.
really good discussion. Just being on this board for just at a year now, I was just really impressed with our feedback for them and the respect that we have for our responsibility to make sure that we are good fiduciaries, but as well as being respectful of our visitors and citizens. So we should acknowledge that as well.
I will add the sort of widespread council support was at some level surprising. But certainly well received. The business case was made. And I guess the comment I want to make here, so we heard the presentation today, and I'm not going to go against the tide, but clearly we're still leaving a lot of money on the table. And not scientifically, but I'll just say anecdotally, my experience being in multiple cities is your local jurisdiction, the behavior will adapt to the local culture. People know the odds are they won't get ticketed, so they park all over the place. The odds are I can run in there and spend 20 minutes even though I'm in a loading zone and nothing's gonna happen. And that will continue as long as it's allowed. I'm not advocating a very aggressive enforcement stance, but the enforcement measure is what gets people to stop parking in loading zones and disable parking. I mean, people do that too. That's gonna continue to go on until some action is taken to curb it. So we're sort of saying we're willing to live with it, and if that's a local sentiment, then so be it, but I'm just sort of saying for the record, we shouldn't be expecting to see some great behavioral change because the rates are going up. People are still gonna park wherever they see a spot, legal or not.
So Milton, I guess this is a good time to, how could the DDA interface with the city more effectively on enforcement, since they're handled by two different parts? So enforcement's the city, DDA is the rates, and PCI are the management of the structures, but as far as curbside goes and curb management, how do we effectively work with enforcement to get the outcome that we want without being maybe too aggressive to the point that it's bordering on abusive, you know?
Well, we're at the opposite end of the spectrum now. We have about 8 community standards people. So we're expecting them, we the city, we're expecting them to deal with parking issues. We're sending them to parks when we have issues there. We've got the people parking all over the place when folks are coming to go tubing in the water, the same people. And my thing is, you can't ask 8 people, 10 people, or whatever, to cover all those things and do it well. If we hire more people, then we're sort of saying we're going to have stepped up enforcement. The question is that what policymakers in the community and this board want? The sense I've gotten in my short time here is we're not really sure we want that. My point is, if we don't want more enforcement, we're going to continue to get all of the things she was citing when she was running through. When you go to other cities who have less of an issue than us, the enforcement's much more aggressive because people know, hey, 5 minutes, you can still get a ticket, don't do that. Here, it's not really the case.
I guess where does that direction then, the change in sentiment, if there is one, come from in terms of a policy level? Is that a council?
Well, and if I could jump onto that question, community standards are part of the police staff and budget?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they are. If this board was supportive of additional enforcement, you could take an action and simply let me know that. And so for the benefit of, if you wanted to do a resolution on it, I would excuse myself from voting here because you're going to be sending it to me. I do not have any basis to go to council at this point and say, we'd like to see more enforcement in parking policies in downtown. Therefore, I'm proposing to add X more community standards people. The other side of that equation, is being honest here, in Ann Arbor, some people have issues with the police. So the fact that you'd be increasing the police budget to hire the people, some people don't want to do that. They don't want anything that ups the police budget, even though it's not really the same. It's not the sworn people. These people, their function is different. but they have to have the official authority to issue a ticket, and you can't get that if you work in water. You gotta be part of the police department.
Thank you. Next up, we have communications. The following communications are included in the board packet. This is all informational material. No action is required. And staff are available if there are questions. We'll start with the staff report. We have just read. No one's actually reporting. Okay.
Right, I mean,
Yep.
it was included in the packet as
Yep.
informational, we're here for questions.
Okay, great. So under update there, do we have any questions on the staff report? For staff?
I'd be curious to hear a little bit more of an update about the 4th Avenue design project. I don't know if you have anything more. I'm just curious in that.
I can start, but we'll probably rely on Amber. So that project is scheduled for construction in FY '26, currently in the design phase with our partners, the AAA and the city. And Amber, do you want to add any details? Clearly, I don't know.
Well, it just mentioned like specific design elements and stuff, so I was just curious, since the last time we talked about it, like any new.
Yeah, so since the last time we shared the design with you all, it has not changed substantially.
Okay.
What has changed is we've made progress on preparing the construction documents, so those are at 60% completion, and then we have an updated estimate from our consultant team. And with that estimate, as is typical, we're learning that everything we wanted doesn't fit within everybody's budget. So now what we're doing on the staff side is making some kind of decisions about what we could reduce in like the amenities of the project or the scope of the project in order to bring it into our budget. And if there's interest, we can bring it to a future work session. That's an update.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Great. Lastly, we'll also see the 2024 DDA meeting schedule included in the packet for your calendar, and I'm sure Kelly will be sending out some invites soon. Last up, we have public comment. We have time available. Anyone who does have a public comment, you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, Peter Honeyman, downtown resident. I want to comment on the parking rate study. I hope you'll keep your eye off of the revenue opportunities and instead focus on how we can make highest and best use of the curb space. A lot of people would argue that long-term storage or even short-term storage of private vehicles is not the highest and best use of our curb space. At the same time, well, let me just say that, you know, as a 20-year downtown resident who has owned a car most of the time, but not a parking space, I'm kind of an expert on downtown parking. And I think what you want to encourage is what we see is the real usage the real usage and the real needs that we have, which is mostly this short-term parking, which supports businesses in a way that's kind of critical. Like we couldn't like eliminate all street parking because it is critical to businesses, but that sort of suggests that you know what we want to do is encourage opportunities for this short-term parking, discourage long-term parking on the streets, and try to shove all the long-term parking into the parking structures. And I think that's kind of been our strategy for a long time. There are some things that we do that discourage that. For example, in the parking structures, it charges by the hour. So it's only $1.20 an hour there, and I think it's what, $2.40 or something an hour on the street. But on the street, 5 minutes is a lot cheaper than 5 minutes in the structure. And if what we're seeing is, the sort of intermediate time parking, people are being discouraged from parking in the structures. So it's that kind of thinking that I hope you'll bring to it. I'm a little concerned that the curb management study and the parking rates restructuring are kind of going at this in step. I'm a little concerned that they're not communicating with one another. I'm probably wrong about that probably they are informing one another. So that's basically my message is let's think about the values and not the revenues and achieve those values through the parking rate adjustments.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Anyone else for public comment? Seeing none, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Support.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.